This one's just going to be really short. It's just maybe a tiny bit of encouragement um, to just take the first step for those that maybe they've been led by the Spirit, and they've done some things, and they've changed a little bit, or maybe even a lot. And some others maybe, they're just Pharisees and don't have the Spirit at all. Uh, but if you have been led and you truly believe so, yeah, you could say to yourself, I'm definitely seeking the kingdom first and asking the Father for all things. Show me truth and studying and learning and all these things. Well, if he has led you up to this point, then, well, the learning never stops, I guess. And studying and, learning, correcting, chastising, that comes, change, constantly growing, that always continues the growing. So if you haven't done some of these things that, that I believe fully still stand, uh, just do whatever you can for the moment. Start keeping some of these things, especially the Sabbath day, the seventh day. It's more than just, it's more than just a commandment. Do the commandments, they you learn the fruits of the spirits from doing these things. And you'll be blessed with more so spiritual gift, blessings than before, where more so. But I'm not saying he can't bless you, outwardly physical things, give you whatever you need, and be content with what you have. I'm not saying that, but it's more so a spiritual, one step towards more obedience will open up more things. You'll learn more things, and you'll continue to become changed for the better when you start doing these things. So the Sabbath is a big deal. It's really it's a sign. That's why it's written like that. Um, I probably shouldn't do a search on Sabbath is a sign.
According to Robesonian, God gave the Sabbath day to keep as a sign between himself and Israel, that ye may know that I am the Lord that did sanctify you. By observing the Sabbath, Israel would give a testimony that he was their God and they were his people who would always acknowledge the day on which he rested after finishing creation.
Ezekiel, there's other places where it says it's a sign. I also gave them my Sabbath as a sign between us. It's the sign of the covenant, It's the sign of the covenant, a sign that more literally speaking, it's a sign of your acknowledgement towards, you have the seal written on your forehead spiritually instead of the mark of the beast spiritually, whatever that is. I don't know physically. I don't know if anyone knows for sure physically, whatever this thing is, but the spiritual issue is the main problem. Anyone who's willfully or ignorantly, whatever, not keeping his commandments they have the mark of the beast. You have to understand that. We did a lot of videos, and maybe I'll look into some of those videos me and Martin did and just see if I could look into it. A few videos that, they speak on doctrine and teaching a lot, and how people, who and what people are and what we're supposed to become and stuff. But the reason why I just started over is because I want to make sure that video is not going to lead someone to think that you could just do whatever you want. So if a video here and there, I might check it out and bring it back if I believe it's not, too I don't know. I don't even think there's many videos of when we did the videos that, we didn't say go out and sin ever that I could recall. Never say such a thing. Always taught faith is with works. It goes hand in hand, and faith alone garbage, with just all alone, all by itself. You just cut off and separate. We're not talking about the moment someone believes and their sins are removed and they're found justified. That's not what we're talking about. That's what the church world can't understand. It's so simple. Yes, after you believe and have faith, now what do you do to be saved from sin and death on Judgment Day? You keep his commandments. You think the Messiah is going to be found a liar or any word of his lies? What should I do to enter into life? And he said, keep the commandments. And the Sabbath is included in the Big Ten, and more like an overview of everything. It's not the only commandment. It's not. It's a sin still to sleep with an animal or practice witchcraft or, you know, tattooing your body after coming to the knowledge of truth. People who already done that and, did these things to themselves. Obviously, they didn't have the understanding, but I'm saying people who claim to believe, they shouldn't be doing that. Tattooing yourself or cutting yourself, whatever. That's a specific thing. And look at the world today. Everyone's got so many people now, more and more. 20 years ago, yeah, it existed, but it was more like in the beginning, just here and there, and it was like hardcore biker gangs or something, or they're really rough people who tattoo them. Now the good has become evil, and evil is good so much more than just 40, 50 years ago that virtually no one sees that anymore as like kind of a sign of a spiritual problem, people that need to get tattoos constantly. Another interesting discernment that I've seen are people who are really, really hooked and attached to animals. They like love animals so much more than people. There's a weird spirit, devil spirit involved in that. It's I've seen it. I've seen it. At my last job, I was tempted. You know, this this woman younger than me at work, hitting on me or whatever, and I respectfully, declined um, because I refuse, and it's not even really on my mind. So it's kind of crazy. I guess I've obviously been given that gift where it says that some have this, most cannot. But tattooed everywhere, and I'm not condemning. I'm just teaching, giving. That's all. Messiah himself says, "I condemn no man," but he did teach things, didn't he? He brought out lies. So that's actually many verses on you're supposed to do that. And if you have a problem or somebody has a problem in real life with somebody, um, hiding or trying to stay quiet and building up pressure, anger, you shouldn't do that. That's what it means when it says in the law, if something happens or whatever, let me read it. Admonish the brother. It's in the Old Testament somewhere. Maybe if I put in Exodus. Well, it's in there. Some kind of strife or whatever, some problem, somebody hates you or whatever, something happens, they say something. don't keep it to yourself. That's what it means to admonish. You actually bring it about and say, why are you doing this to me? Something like that. Whatever the situation is, you'll know what to say. You don't just hold it and you hold your anger and grudge, even though a lot of times, it is some better sometimes to say nothing, but, it just depends. And he gives us the power not to hold grudges and have hatred in our heart. But a lot of times, if there's a problem with someone, especially someone that claims to believe, you don't walk away quiet. Question it, say something. Either he or she will condemn himself by not even remotely wanting to listen, and it's settled that way, or they might ask, you reason, and they might ask for forgiveness, and then you forgive them, and it's settled that way, which would be the better way, but you can't really control it. So up to a certain point only. I was getting at something right before that, but what was I going to do? This video is take the first step. What was I going to say now? Sabbath. Yeah. It's still, and I I tried to make this excuse too when I first started seeing this thing specifically about like the law not going away and commandments not going away, that they're not just like everything has a spiritual meaning, but not everything is only like spiritual. You still have a flesh and blood body, and the temple is your body is the temple. So the clean on the outside and inside counts. It's what the scriptures teach. Paul even says that. Cleanse the flesh out, outside and inside, to be clean. So it does matter, because when you start following these things, then you're going to see real change in your life, and you'll have more power to overcome more things and more faith. So you take a step towards obedience because you would want to, not because it's a heavy burden or, wow, this really sucks. No, it shouldn't be like that. You want to do whatever you can that you know of, and then learn and grow from there. And he gives you the want to want it. So the people that don't want it, they don't have his spirit in them. Done. And then there's going to be some that they have been let out and called out of the church world system, and they'll resist, and maybe get angry and try to prove, because that's what I did. And I got put to shame by somebody else. A different channel actually read my comment. I posted a comment like, it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, whatever, I don't know. And I told him, he's like, looks like you're falling from grace or whatever, because he was teaching keep the commandments. And so I didn't read his reply right away. I came back like one and a half weeks later or 2 weeks later, saw the comment, and the way he answered it like was, whoa, man, nobody's ever been able to do this to me. And I'm not saying that out of like a prideful, because I believe he's given me a lot concerning like, understanding spiritual truth and doctrine and everything, because I could see the contradiction. So I'm always, if it contradicts, it can't be true. I want to know the truth. And that last 7 years, no one's been able to contradict where would I say something and it's like specifically like on major teachings, doctrines or something. I never was like, man, I need to check and see if I have been corrected on some more minor things, just through the Spirit, teaching me, showing me that there's some kind of error in my belief. I don't know what the example would be right now. I remember a while back, looking at the pre-trib doctrine, and trying to test that and see if it's true. And I may have sort of went with it like a long time ago for like a really short time, maybe, I don't know. And I started studying it and not seeing it in scriptures. And then he showed me the truth. There's no such thing. If you want to call pre something rapture, whatever, then you could maybe say something like pre wrath, because that moment there won't be a safe place on earth. So I believe they're caught up, or either divinely protected or something, because, the wrath won't hit his people. So, and it won't be before that. Tribulation will be through it. All of us, everyone. But the wrath directly from, his judgments will be spared off the earth or whatever, or protected during that time, because he doesn't pour out his wrath judgments, physical wrath judgments on the earth and, destroys his people. Sodom and Gomorrah, every one of them was corrupt and in sin and lawlessness. A good sign for a nation has always been this: sexual perversion. When the sexual perversion starts getting rampant and out of control, that's a sign that there could be decades left, or maybe just 50 years or 100. It's time's running out. And Sodom and Gomorrah was obviously very sexually perverted, but the love also grew cold, and they weren't good to strangers or neighbors. So it was more than just that, all kinds of sins, but sexual perversion is one of them. Just out of control with lust. And that's one of the big sins. That's one of I call the big sins the ones that you got stoned to death for, if caught. And I don't even know that they even later on how strict they were with that, how many people actually got stoned, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that more, but they probably didn't even follow it a lot of times. Who knows? But that's the divine judgment. Wages of sin is death, and certain sins are just death penalty. That's it. So spiritually, it's a problem. Don't think the sin is changed. The degree or amount of wickedness about the sin, don't think it changed just because no one's getting stoned to death today. They are getting spiritually stoned to death. So everything is more so spiritual, but that doesn't mean, that the law vanished now. It's just all spiritual. The law is spiritual, but Paul goes into detail on what that means. His inward part, rejoiced in doing that, delighted in doing that. The law, it's spiritual, and that's what he means. A spiritual person will keep his commandments, and that's how they're spiritual specifically. And a carnal person will hate it. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They're a lust of the flesh, pride of life. Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. The big three that sum up pretty much, it sums up everything, really. Pride's connected to all kinds of things. Someone that kills someone, are they humble? No, they're prideful. Someone that, well, certain doctrines are prideful. That's why I don't like it so much, but because he resists the proud. So certain doctrines are prideful. All kinds of actions are prideful. But the sin is still serious. So it's a spiritual destruction, blinding, confusion, no understanding. That's the kind of judgment going on. And then that's no good, because then the only thing left is looking forward to fiery judgment after this life. So yeah, it's a spiritual death. It's not like a physical stoning, but he says to the 7 churches, which represent all of them for all time, the whole thing, the complete thing, the perfect thing. you say you're rich and increased with goods, like physically, which that's an amazing verse there. And that's the Messiah speaking there. John writing down, because virtually everyone's doing that. Man, I'm increased in goods and I'm rich and increased with goods. I'm blessed. I must be I must be doing good. That's a serious blinding. The people who God gives, the Father gives to so much, it's actually not even, it kind of does two things. It shows him that he's still good to those that hate him, and he still is a giver of a lot of good things, even to evil people. And the other thing is, it's a deception at the same time. These physical blessings, to rely on them, and rich and increased with goods, because it's a spiritual destruction for loving that and focusing on that. So that's the true condition of that person. That's why he says, you say you're rich and increased with goods, but you're miserable, wretched, poor, blind, and naked. So spiritually, they're not going to be covered. People who don't overcome sin, they won't be covered. Like Adam was covered after he sinned. His sins were covered. It's like, yeah, he was literally covered, but it also means his sins were covered. So that teaching goes all the way back to the beginning. People who aren't covered, they're going to be naked. Physical picture showing you something spiritual. Adam was naked, he was carnal. And I could say that with pretty good authority, because only carnal people sin all the time. I know we all make glitches and mistakes, but for teaching's sake, carnal people sin, right? So I'm not saying I've been perfect or I'm perfect. That's not I'm sure you understand, for teaching's sake, the carnal people sin. So how could Adam truly perfectly be in the spiritual image of the Father? That would automatically make the Father a sinner, because if that was the image, the example of perfection and everything, knowledge of good and evil, like he has, and understanding and able to resist sin and everything else, then he wouldn't have sinned, but he did. So he got defiled afterwards, but still how come he couldn't resist it? Why did he cave in? Or Eve, especially, it's just the way it had to be, I guess. Every one of us would have caved in if we were them, obviously. So to be naked is spiritual nakedness is in sin. So it's going to be something like that in Judgment Day, okay? If this puts just enough fear in you to actually start keeping his commandments proper, not some kind of evil fear, people who fear their love's not perfected, but there is a proper fear or reverence. So that's how that doesn't contradict in John, your love, because it teaches the fear of the Yahuwah is the beginning of knowledge. So it's a different kind of fear. That's how you understand that. It's not the evil kind of fear, worrying and shaking what's going to happen tomorrow. That means your love is not perfected. So, judgment will be something like that, I imagine. Imagine a naked person that's not some crazy person, that wants to be naked on the street. But use yourself as an example. Suddenly you're naked in the middle of the street with cars and people everywhere, right? Boom, naked. Wouldn't you be ashamed? And so it will be on that day. Spiritually, they're going to be naked. See, for their sins not being covered. There's so much in Genesis right in the beginning. You could get so much out of just Genesis in the first 2-3 chapters, so much in there. It basically tells the story over and over again of woman being more easily deceived than man, okay? Because Adam was not deceived. That's what Paul says. He got that out of the scriptures, or at least he got that understanding and pulled it out of there, because it doesn't say it in there like that. It's not that, I guess, men don't ever get deceived. I don't think that's the point, but Adam wasn't deceived in this case. So the man usually always has they're not as easily deceived as the woman overall, most men. But women, they're easily deceived, or more so with like flesh, carnality, like temptations and deceived in that way. You know, it's not that the man isn't, though. I'm just trying to get a point out. But it's painting a picture of the woman being more of a seducer with her power, her beauty, her glory, that they know they have, and they use it to their advantage, ultimately disadvantage most of the time. And so Adam didn't get tricked by the serpent, but he did have another weakness, though. See, so it's not just because Adam didn't get deceived there, it doesn't mean men never get deceived. And just because Eve got deceived, it doesn't mean that there's no women out there that aren't deceived. It works both ways, but it's a bigger weakness. Maybe that's the better explanation on that. It's a bigger weakness for women with carnal, fleshly, outwardly things that look good, and they want to have power and riches too. Everyone loves that, but they're more after like the power. And if they could get the power, they could usually get the money too. But I'd say power is like number one: control, power, to seduce, to get her way, to give her something that she wants. They use others in very secretive, snakish ways, that they're, clever. They're better than the man on average, than tricking people or faking attitude or weird testing. There's not the dishonesty that exists. It's so, man, once you see these spiritual things, this world is so corrupt. It's so corrupt, but people can't say what I'm saying right now, most of them, or they can't see what I'm saying. And like the average relationship in this world is mostly based off lies. The ones that seem to last longer, it's because they lied more to each other. That's pretty much it. So she goes to Adam and goes, "Here, take." So she seduced him and he caved in. And that's man's weakness, bigger weakness than women, I believe. And women have a bigger weakness on worldly, carnal things, riches, power, things that look good. But both have all these weaknesses, but one more so than the other. It's kind of unique for the woman and more unique for the man. He's after the women. It's why adultery is mentioned first in the New Testament. Virtually any time that the commandments are quoted from, every now and then, a few commandments, adultery's first. Check it out. That was an interesting, I actually learned that from someone, Ray, Bible Truths, but there's some doctrines that he didn't have that were doctrines of demons, but he had a lot of good teaching. I think he got too big and he started to fall off on leaning on the Father for truth and try to figure things out, as so many people had questions and emailed him. And so he's now putting the pressure on to figure out some of these things. And I think he started to think that only he has these understandings, a little bit prideful. But I wasn't the only one that discerned that. Someone else also discerned the same thing. But anyways, and he taught to break the commandments. Ultimately, it was all spiritual, and that's how I believe he was ultimately. I I hope not, but that I don't want anyone to go into that judgment. But I think he's a really high level false prophet because there's some truths in there, like the salvation of all, through judgment. Obviously, no one's saved anyways, but he'll have mercy on all, just like it says he put all in disobedience. That's literally everyone. The same all, so he could have mercy on those same all. If it said the same all, people still wouldn't believe it. If it said he put all in disobedience, oh yeah, that's everyone. And then so that he can have mercy on the same all, they still wouldn't believe it. You don't believe me? Oh yeah, they would not believe it still. They'd still twist it. They'll find a way. But these verses are so clear, so many of them. Whole creation will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of the Father. So I'm just giving out a little bit of experience warnings to that, how slippery some false prophets could be, because they could have a lot of truth and somehow there still ends up being something off about them and they're deceived. And they're actually teaching you to break, once again, exposing the church world, the harlot, and everything else. And they themselves are not teaching proper doctrine and truth. That's why, I feel like I cannot err or err by saying keep the commandments and keep whatever is that you can keep, learn it and do it. I can't go wrong at all by saying that. So not a false prophet, because I'm truly seeking, but everyone says they're seeking the kingdom first. So it's deceiving. But when you truly start believing you're supposed to actually keep the commandments and everything, the false prophets are really easy to spot now, like way easier than before. Oh, he teaches people to break his commandments. Oh, he's false. See what I mean? And it's interesting that many people don't come to that point of discernment. It never even crossed their mind that they're supposed to, or it did, but they're just glazed over and blinded that they're supposed to keep his commandments. They never got to that point. So they get deceived by other false prophets, all the divisions everywhere, because they never had the knowledge of truth anyway. So there's so many paths to be deceived. And honestly, how does someone prove that you can go wrong teaching that? The best they can do is say he's a works salvationist, he's a Pharisee, he's a legalist. Works salvationist, legalist, Pharisee. You know how backwards that is? They're the Pharisees that teach to break his commandments. They're the Pharisees who add and subtract. Read Matthew again. Those Pharisees are the same people today. They break it and teach people to keep certain things, whatever they say, but they themselves don't keep it. And they add or remove. In this case, they removed everything virtually. I suppose some would say the 10 Commandments still exist, and then they say, well, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, set apart. Well, the Sabbath means only that we have rest in him every day, even though that's a spiritual truth. It's true. You know what else is true? To actually remember the day and keep it set apart. That's the fourth commandment. If it was spiritual, I mean, see how stupid it gets? Remember. Why does it say remember more than once? Because people forgot. Most of them forgot. and they never would come back. 2,000 years of forgetting to keep that day, not days, plural. So if it's just spiritual, that remember part is just worthless and even stupid, because, well, I keep the Sabbath every day spiritually. So you don't really have to remember to keep it, right? No. So, well, it used to be for the Jews. Oh, so you don't live by every word. See, there's no way to break his scriptures, man. There's with just a couple verses, you could put down major doctrines if you know what they mean and use them properly, like I just did. Well, it's not that it's not true. It used to be true. Remember to keep my Sabbath. And now it's, that fade. So that's not true, is what they're saying. It used to be, but it's not true anymore. That's your final conclusion, that it's not true today. It's not true. That's what you have to say. Can't you see it for those that are confused still about this? I resisted it too. So I'm a good example of what's going on in the mind, because I was there just a little while ago searching these things out and resisting it a little, but then I threw my hands up like I always remember to do and say, show me the truth. Not my will, not my truth. You show me. If this is true, then I'll look into it and study it and do it. And that's what I did. And it was a battle for a few days, because part of me wanted evidence that, oh, we don't have to keep all his commandments and stuff. And another part of me actually, well, I guess just wanted the truth. But there was part of me that didn't want it to be true. So I didn't even want this to be true in the beginning, because that would, and you know why? Even though I didn't think of it just like this, is because I would be wrong. Oh, that's going to hurt, isn't it, to be wrong? So forget that right or wrong stuff. Everybody's been wrong about many things. So it's a sign, and it says it's a sign for his people and of a covenant, with a covenant in them. We have a covenant. The renewed covenant doesn't do away with his words. And all you have to do from there is rightly divide, certain things. You study them, what's been fulfilled, how it works better, and all that physical picture of sacrifices for sins that's going on now. And he's in, at the right hand of the Father, doing all those sacrifices, spiritually speaking, atoning for sins. So sin never changed. It's still serious. How can't people see that? I will say this, which, you're not going to hear in a church building, temple. Old Testament scripture teaches you way more than the New Testament. Now, if that makes you a little angry, or that's all blasphemy, I'm serious though. Not that, the Spirit has to lead you and guide you and confirm things and show you the meaning, but you still have to put in the work. You can't just sit in a chair, never have ever studied, never looked at anybody else or see what other teachers are saying and all this other stuff. Discernment, he gives you these things too. Discernment, able to discern between situations, false prophets, all that stuff. But the Old Testament scriptures show you how he works, and it's not that we know perfectly the Father, but it shows you how he works. That never changed. That's how he works. It's just more so spiritual with the judgment part of things, and I think that's what it means. First the natural, then the spiritual. But I think even I tried to use that to do away with his commandments, certain ones, specifically the Sabbath day, because everything is spiritual. So That wasn't a proper understanding of that verse and other verses, though. And I'm not showing off, but, find me someone that makes a major correction and admits they're wrong. You think that I had fun doing that? Oh, I'm going to start all over and put videos I think that are going to lead in a certain direction for sure, and hide all the other videos and start over and bring back ones that I think are not hurtful. Not too many people are able to do that. I'm just saying. I don't see that every day. I don't even know that I've ever seen it on YouTube. I'm sure it's happened though, but not much. So that's I think why Paul was chosen by God, because he was not only very knowledgeable in the law, so he knows what he's talking about, but he was persecuting and had hatred and anger. So he comes and flips over 180, and he can give you detail from experience on the gospel, the truth, everything else that he writes, because he was there and he was, a Pharisee, keeping the commandments and everything, but his heart wasn't circumcised. That's one of the commandments in there too. So you could do it all in vain. Paul's an example of that. You can be a self-righteous person and you're only doing it because, oh, I'm better than everyone. If that's your intentions and not truly, seeking the kingdom first, worshiping him first and not other deities, because whoever doesn't worship the true Father in spirit and truth, they're worshiping something else. It's just the way it is. It's the way people are made. They're worshiping something else, someone, system, or whatever it is. Carnal things, physical things, toys. They're worshiping something else. That's why I think because I'm just showing you that's how my mind worked, though. It wanted to try to prove it wrong, and I'm seeing other people now comments on other videos I've made, or one or two here when I started bringing this out more. That same resistance I saw in them, I had that. So don't think it's unusual, but if he's truly leading you, you're going to break through. You're not going to turn backwards and say, I'm just going to do whatever I want. But many people might do that. So believe the scriptures. It's not grievous, or, it's not a heavy yoke, heavy burden. That's what it teaches. It's not. So therefore it's not, it's not, because he makes you want to do it. Whatever you can. You might be all doing, if you were led up by the Spirit up to this point, he led you in a lot of ways to actually keep things you didn't even know that's written down. So you might have been keeping a lot of these things, at least in some degree. It's not like a huge radical change is made all of a sudden, like unbeliever that never believed before, now they've got a lot to learn and understand. But people that's been on this path for a few years in the truth, and so they thought it was truth, they've probably grown and understood some things, way more than before they ever claimed to believe. So and the blessings are a promise from, once again, that's why it's my understanding is it's more spiritual now. But they were physically, you could see the blessings, outwardly, and all these other things, and even good health is mentioned more than once, and take away diseases from the land, and sicknesses, and good health, and miscarriages or some more, or losing kids at they were, if they kept his way, they would be blessed, but if not, cursed then. So the curses and blessings are more so spiritual today. That's my understanding. But does that mean that the law and commandments are now, it just all went spiritual now? Like the Sabbath, for example, is strictly spiritual. There's no actual, did that all go like, did that change? Even though I think my understanding was wrong here too, because I wasn't studied really well in the Old Testament scriptures, just verses here and there, that I've read for doctrine, for teaching, whatever, but still wasn't very familiar with them because I would have been claiming that when he said, don't even lust, and that's lusting is adultery, but really it taught it all along, it says outright circumcised hearts. Circumcised heart means you keep these things spiritually too, not just on a physical level. Circumcised heart is a spiritual thing. So not only are you staying away from adultery, it doesn't even cross your mind, and that's how it should be. Or if it does, you get rid of it right away, if it's tempting, whatever. And so it's not a brand new teaching, but it's possible to do. I think more so than the Israelites back then, because most of them didn't even have Holy Spirit. It was only given to like a few prophets, kings, whatever. And with the Israelites, I don't know. I just don't think they just didn't have it in their heart. So that's why the renewed covenant is better, because he promises to put it in your heart. You don't have to force it in yourself. That's what the Spirit is doing, working in you. But you still have to, you can't just sit by and do nothing. So as you learn, they're being written in your heart. And that's why the new covenant, big reason why it's a better covenant, because they just couldn't get it in their heart. It says, oh, if they had such a heart, it says, oh, if they had such a heart to do all these things. So they were more carnal, I would say, but, and that's what I'm still looking into, learning these things. Does that mean all of the law is like with the spiritual understanding of adultery? It's not about physical anything anymore. Is that what the New Testament teaches? I'm not saying that. I don't see that. Both are true for the things that it says not to do or do. There's a spiritual understanding, and you apply that, and then some other things it's honor your father and mother. It's not just spiritual. You're not supposed to punch him. That still applies. So you can't punch him in the face and then say, oh, spiritually though, I'm honoring my father and mother. It's stupid. So is that the same with the Sabbath? Well, it's spiritual, so now the physical thing is worthless. We don't keep it. And no, I'm convinced in my mind it never went away and never was changed, and no one can prove it. They can give a few verses, but then once you show them what that context is, and once they start even learning it, they find out themselves how, like, whoa, there's only a few handful of verses that are just maybe hard to understand. Once you do, you don't have anything. It's never changed. So is there a spiritual meaning to don't touch dead things or whatever? You'll be unclean. And unclean, I guess, would be, I don't know, unholy for a little while or something, till they wash themselves. Does he still want to, the spiritual understanding is don't touch dead dead things, unbelievers, become one with them, touch them. But is the physical application still true? Does that ever change the actual commandments? I don't think so. I don't think so. Both are true. Spiritual understanding and whatever it tells you to do and not to do, Is there spiritual understanding with the food? Well, no one ever told me this, but what I said before, and I've never read it, but it makes plenty of sense, is don't eat food, unclean food, which would be false food spiritually, from false prophets, because it's going to hurt your spiritual body. I think that has great meaning, but does that mean now you could break the food law? I don't think so. Messiah was more spiritual than any of us because he was perfect and he had the spirit with power, more so than we have it. And that's my belief, because you'd have to have the spirit with quite some power not to even sin. So he's a special chosen, King of Kings, not just a normal king, but a King of Kings. Special chosen instead of just chosen, or extra special chosen. Extra special chosen. He had the spiritual understanding. He says, don't just commit adultery. If you lust, you're already committing it in your mind. That's spiritual. He was spiritual. He wasn't carnal. And yet he kept the Father's laws and commandments. And he was spiritual. No one's going to become more spiritual than that today. So that's a new thing that just popped up in my mind. Well, we don't keep it like he did, Why not? He was more spiritual than you. He's more spiritual than me. And we being more carnal, or not, you know what I mean, not having the spirit in as much power as he did. And we're going to say what's spiritual and what we should or shouldn't do. It seems pretty stupid now to me. But he says is unclean, period. It's the understanding. Well, so if that understanding was true, it would have to be true for all of the commandments. Otherwise, what? Pick and choose. I don't see any scripture that says these are spiritual only, as in invisible things in the heart only. And these things, the other half, are physical and spiritual, So, what's an example of, like, I don't know, tattooing yourself, whatever, cutting your flesh? Well, I got the spiritual meaning of that, Our bodies, our spiritual bodies, have to be clean and not marred up, and, all these things. Therefore, I could tattoo the crap out of my body because I understand the spiritual understanding. It's not making sense, is it? That's not good. Somebody that has that in the faith, and then they got, let's just say, after they claim to believe and have faith and all this, I was saved 40 years ago, they started tattooing their whole body, their arms, their face, I mean, can't you make discernment? Don't say I'm judgmental with some kind of evil, like a condemnation, hateful judging, it's not what I'm doing. I'm discerning. And can't you discern, anyone that's watching, that just doesn't look good? How could it believe, everywhere full of tattoos? How is that a good representation of the Father, of the Messiah? How's that a good representation to anything, to unbelievers? You're going to look like a thug or a gang member or whatever. All of those things are already attached. People know it whether they think about it or not. All right. There's no such thing in the world as someone that's got full of tattoos everywhere and they aren't also sexually perverted. Okay. No such thing. Are there rare exceptions? Maybe, but you understand my point. Forget the 0.01%. talking about 99.9 or 99.8. You know, someone that's just loaded with, they got some spiritual issues. It's like a guarantee. It's like, here, look, my body is unclean and it's filthy, you know, and showing how unfilthy and unclean I am in the inside. That's what tattoos represent. But this sounds extremely judgmental, right? I guess our creator is the most judgmental being in the world, you know. All the things and commandments he says to do and not to do. Oh, it's pretty judgmental, isn't it? Don't tell me what to do. But you got to get past that judging stuff, you know. That's what you're actually supposed to do, is discern, right? Rightfully discern wrong from right. Someone can't do that while they're in some kind of blinding in sin. They're missing the mark somewhere. So I'm sure that I wish it wasn't. I don't know how 56 minutes pass by. It's crazy. It's long. I don't want them to be that long, but hopefully people could see that the arguments that we've all made are actually they're not very good. They're dumb a lot of times, you know, by saying it's all about the heart. I don't even know of any scripture that says it's only wrong. That's very important. It's very important, all about the heart. It's all about obedience too, more so. Your heart is not right with the Father if you're willfully just ignoring things and you're not obedient. That's a heart problem. So how could someone say it's all or only about the heart and then they're breaking things? You can't love the Father and also break his commandments, or want to, you know, or just ignore them. You can't just, it's not some kind of emotional thing. Maybe I'll make a separate video and speak a few minutes on that. You know, love. People make up their own definitions of love, you know. That's why we have the word written down to study, and the Spirit gives us and guides us and leads us into the true meaning of these words, because the definition of love is given to us, and that's the true definition, not what people make up. Take the first step. If you don't keep the Sabbath day, it's a sign that you're not his, because the Sabbath day is a sign. You know, it's a sign. It's one of the few commandments that I know of, or maybe it's mentioned elsewhere, but it seems like that one is more special when it says sign more than a few times. It's a sign between me and you. Do you understand what's going on? How he knew? Of course he knew. He declared the end from the beginning. He knew because he declared it to be that way, but that it would be a sign of people that are, you know, that don't keep that or want to. They definitely have nothing to do with them, and they have other issues, spiritual issues, pride, false doctrine, and idol worship, and all kinds of other stuff going on, Trinity nonsense, and paganism and everything else. You know, the ones that don't keep it, it's a very good sign that they are not the true believers. Can't we see that? It's a sign. Does that mean that everyone that keeps it is a true believer? No. But I'm making a point, the contrast, that everyone who doesn't, they definitely aren't. They definitely aren't true believers if they don't want to keep anything. Why do you think people are so resistant to this? You know, he gave me this understanding now so I could speak and say it. Because we could have read that 1,000 times and you never understand what I just said. And I didn't even understand it or saw that with my spiritual eyes, you know, that it's a sign. It's like an outwardly sign. It's like, there you go. Here it is. The Father gives us this sign so that we could easily discern. Oh, you don't Oh, you're against the Sabbath keeping? Oh, you're not his. Guaranteed. It's a promise. It's a sign. It's a promise for those who do not want to and they continue not to. That's what I'm saying. They're not his. They're false prophets. They're fakes. They have not. They hate him because because they're yet carnal. They're still carnal. They're just pretending. You give them the true Father, and true teaching on who he is, true doctrine, and everything else. They're going to hate it. They're going to hate him. They're going to hate you. Because anyone who doesn't have the spirit of Yahuwah, as I believe that's, at least I'm not 100% sure, but well, I made an effort and I'm not going to stop making an effort, but I believe that's the close, most evidence I've seen is for that name, Yahuwah. But regardless, it's a sign between him and the people that they're truly wolves in sheep clothing. Now, it doesn't mean that some people, they resist and then they finally acknowledge and see that this is truth. I'm not talking about them, that ultimately they would start wanting to keep these things. I'm talking about people that will continually go on from this day forward and walk away from the truth. That those who do that are definitely not his. And the scripture proves it over and over again. It's like the one commandment that he gave us that can show you with a lot of quickly and with clarity about who the false prophets are. The ones that willfully and don't want to keep the Sabbath, they're also breaking other commandments. Okay, don't be deceived. Like, oh, that's the only commandment. I'm not breaking it out of all scripture. No, they're breaking a lot of things spiritually in the heart and other things. They don't do a lot of things and they're not careful to do them, or they don't do anything. One of the things that they hate is because I've received it, and for I'm not trying to make it personal on anyone, but you're not the first one, you know who you are, that says I'm possibly being judgmental, maybe, or however you wrote. Trust me, you're not. Before I even came to this clarity on this truth, I was being judged by people because he was really truly leading me and changing my heart. And I stayed away from a lot of things. It's just a better understanding and, doing better now than before, but still, even back then and recently, especially too, they'll call you judgmental. And I'm just saying that's a normal, natural, carnal response. You're going to get that. So they thought the Messiah was extremely judgmental. That's why they wanted to kill him. Can't we see these things, who the people actually are? I hope the people can see this, that blinding sort of just the scales fall off of your eyes and see that, whoa, I am the Pharisees that he's talking about. I am the many called in the Old Testament scriptures that God is talking about, because we all were first that. That's why you have to come out of her. You got to come out of something first. And I don't know if that's true for every single one. Do they all have to come out of the religion, the harlot? Have you ever thought about that? Does every single chosen, whoever they are, have to actually come out of some kind of religion, denomination? I don't know. I think at the very least, most of them, like, I suppose, do atheists come to this true faith? I don't think so. I think they have to go through the system first. If somebody converts an atheist, they're not going to know this truth. That's not, because it's so rare. I mean, you really have to receive the Spirit with some kind of power to come out of there and actually be called out. That's what happened to me. No one told me anything. I just started to see things and believed and studied and searched, and before you know it, I came out of there before I even read that verse, come out of her, my people. He pulled me out of there before I even knew what it meant. But he put something in my spirit, like, this is not right. I can't be here. Something's not right, even way back then, 7 years ago, more than 7 now, that there's something not right with this. And it's sad. I don't want to just dump them, because I didn't have the understanding I do now, but and it didn't, the consequence for doing that didn't really hit me back then, but as long as you're kind of going along to get along in this world, then you're loving your life and you're trying to put one foot in the Father, one foot in the church system. As long as you do that, you'll maintain your friends and maintain whatever. But the moment you start actually receiving His Spirit and start doing these things, and when you get a chance, you tell your friends, you teach them, and then they don't listen to you, and then they don't like you anymore, and then it's over. You don't have any friends left. People are afraid of that happening. I think almost every Christian in the beginning has that kind of sense that they have to give up their life, and give up this world. Maybe not all of them, but I think a lot of them maybe have that kind of sense in the beginning, because whoever believes, they receive the Spirit. It's a promise. So all these people in the religion, they did believe at one point in the beginning. I'm telling you, then they die. And then the seed dies spiritually. They can't come back. They're hardened. They're never going to keep the Sabbath, ever. They're never going to do other things. They're never going to study the scriptures to become perfect, to study and learn on how to act at all times and say the right things with the right heart, when not to, and all these other things, all the wisdom, everything else. They're not going to ever, they're just ever learning, never coming to knowledge. That's the blinding of the church world. I'll probably change the title or add something to it. Take the first step, because let's see. I'm going to end it here. This was a little long again, but whatever, man. I just have a hard time doing 5-minute videos, I guess. All right.